The training was great at 29 Palms, and it prepared us very well. It's almost like the Marine Corps knew that we were going to be sent to Hell's Gate. I was like, we got out of here alive, and we're mentally and physically okay, but that wasn't the case. Coming home was actually fine for me until I got out of the Marine Corps.
The views and opinions in this podcast do not represent the Department of Defense, Department of the Navy, or United States Marine Corps.
After their deployment in 2008, some called them the Forgotten Battalion. But the Marines and sailors of the United States Marine Corps' 2nd Battalion, 7th Marine Regiment reject the way the Forgotten Battalion moniker encourages that narrative of broken veterans. Instead, these warriors simply want to be remembered for the mission they accomplished and for the honor with which they have served their country and their Corps. The majority of 2-7 veterans continue to reflect on their experiences while living their lives and pressing forward. These are their personal stories of resilience, with insight to healthy coping and living with hope. Welcome to the Warriors Roundtable. Today on the Roundtable, we talk to former enlisted Marine Keith Branch. Keith, welcome to Warriors Roundtable. Thanks so much for being here tonight.
Oh, of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I would love to hear your story a little bit. I'm sure everybody else would as well. To start off, you were with 2-7 during their 2008 deployment in the Helmand Province of Afghanistan. Could you tell us a little bit specifically about where you were and what you were doing there?
I was from Weapons Company, and I got attached to Fox out to Nowzad, Afghanistan. As a forward observer. I was a school trained forward observer, and basically from day one, we hit the ground running, hit the ground fighting, and so my job was to work with basically the FAC, the forward air control, and coordinate, bombs. I called in mortars, 81 millimeters and 120s. We got the 120s about mid-deployment. So coming into that deployment, I had some experience in Iraq. I was served in Zidon and Karma on the outskirts of Fallujah. Saw some conflict there. Several firefights, and definitely IEDs were a threat, and of course snipers. Snipers were a big threat. So I came into that deployment into Afghanistan with some combat experience, but combat in Afghanistan was definitely a level up. The fighters seemed to be more trained. They believed in their cause, and they were willing to fight to the death, unlike the fighters that we saw in Iraq, who would typically, take drugs to stand up and fight against the U.S. Marines. As that's what we found when we would, inspect their fighting areas. Anyways, there's a whole different situation in Afghanistan. Just a lot more heavy fighting. They had well dug in fighting positions, and our enemy, the Taliban, were well hidden in the green, I guess we call it the green areas. So the fighting was definitely very intense. If we wanted to fight every single day, which most of the time we did, we knew exactly where to go to get into a firefight. And there was in Nowzad, at least, there was a guaranteed chance of combat at your leisure.
Is there, when you think of all the experiences you've had between Iraq, Afghanistan, is there a particular experience that you find yourself coming back to, or something that you find keeps coming back to mind?
A particular combat incident when Lance Corporal Ivan Wilson, when he was killed by an IED, he actually sat down on an IED, and I was within 20 meters of the incident, and then I witnessed him post-explosion, and him, basically trying to survive. He ended up dying. And that's a memory that I always jump back to. It's very significant for me.
Sure.
But there are also some significant operations that we did, like Taliban headquarters, Pakistani Alley. We did that twice. We did several major operations that stand out to me, where we were able to kill several fighters and accomplish the mission that was given to us. And that was encouraging every time that we were able to accomplish something like gave us more confidence in our ability to fight, gave it the morale improved. And so each one of those operations definitely sticks out to me.
Sure. It sounds like you were engaged in combat pretty regularly. I think at one point you said every day. What was a typical engagement like for you as far as the duration, the intensity? Can you describe that a little bit?
It just depends on how much you wanted to fight. Some of the firefights, for instance, I remember one operation stands out to me pretty significantly. It was at the beginning of that deployment. I believe it was in June. We got there. We got to Nowzad in late May of 2008, and then I believe in June we did an operation called Blue 19, and we were fighting for about 7 or 8 hours. It could have been more, but what I remember is 7 or 8 hours.
Okay.
And we were engaged constantly with the enemy, trying to advance our position. From what I remember, we stayed at this. We were basically pinned at this one house, and the enemy. We were just going back and forth. I was calling in mortar strikes. They were calling in mortar strikes on us, and it was a pretty intense firefight. Others would last only a few minutes. I would say, 3 or 4 minutes, and then that would be the end of it. I think the enemy may have known that we were struggling with air support, as far as having on-call air support at all times. We did not have that. But when the bombing runs would start, they would typically back off, as we had the advantage.
When you think back to those experiences, was there anything the Marine Corps did, or even life did, to prepare you for what you experienced in Afghanistan?
I think the Marine Corps prepared us very well. There's nothing like real experience, and I think that was crucial to our success there in Nowzad. I do count. First of all, I do count Nowzad as a success for the fact that we were able to kill so many Taliban fighters versus how many of our fighters were killed.
Sure.
Yeah, I would say the training was great at 29 Palms, and it prepared us very well for what we were going to experience. It's almost, for me, it's almost like the Marine Corps. When I got back from Iraq, I was immediately sent to Infantry Mortars Leaders Course, where I was trained to be an FO, and it's almost like the Marine Corps knew that we were going to be sent to Hell's Gate. That were preparing me and preparing us as a battalion to go enter, basically hell. And our unit was well prepared. We had a lot of combat leadership from previous deployments, dating back to 04, the 04 deployment, and the 05, 06 deployment, and then the 07 deployment, which I was on. And so we had just these great leaders that come together in this one unit, and they prepared us very well. And we had, again, it's like we had Iraq in our backyard, the 29 Palms as our training ground. So I don't think any other unit could have been as well prepared as us, just for the fact that all the combat experience that we had, the training that we had. I believe we were well prepared. Everybody that I knew, leadership-wise, was competent in their job.
That's a great testament to Marine Corps training for sure. When you talk about your leaders, is there anyone in particular, whether mentioning them by name or not, but is there anyone in particular that stands out to you, and what sort of leadership lesson or lessons did you take away from those folks?
At the time, before he was injured at Pakistani Alley, Staff Sergeant Guest, he was instrumental in leading us. When we faced tough situations, tough, scary situations where imminent death was right there, he had the courage to step up and, as a staff NCO, and lead our entire unit there. He was probably the most courageous leader on the battlefield that I've ever seen. Some might call him crazy, but it's a crazy situation. You have to react accordingly, right, which he did, and I'm a testament to that. I was there at the very front with him every time we charged the enemy, and if I was to go back, that's who I would pick to lead me.
Now, you are, as a bunch of Marines, you are viewed by the world as the elite infantry unit. When you're on that battlefield, you're a group of lions. You've described Sergeant Guest, now I believe Master Sergeant Guest, in some pretty remarkable terms. Were you there the day that he was injured, and could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to talk about the day before he was injured.
Yeah.
We did all I remember is having basically a hasty operation. I think we were told maybe a day or two prior to this that we were going to go recover or blow up a 1,000-pound bomb that had dropped in Taliban territory.
Okay.
Between us and that bomb was a large open field, which we had to basically charge. It was a few hundred meters, a couple football fields long, and we were, we dropped out of the 7-ton somewhere in the middle of that field, and we charged towards towards the Taliban, guns blazing, and they started shooting at us, and we really had no cover until we got to basically up close to them, and we were behind a wall. That's a time when he really stepped up and he led the Marines, and it was a fierce firefight with the Taliban.
And just, if I could, just to be clear, for folks that were there, and certainly folks who have experienced combat, they probably understand what's happening. But the reason you guys are throwing yourselves at this to recover this bomb is because if the Taliban recover this, they can do a whole lot of damage to your fellow Marines or Afghan National Army or whomever. Is that correct?
Correct. The fighters we were dealing with were experts in planting, ground explosives, IEDs, getting a hold of a 1,000-pound bomb, and kill. They would have definitely used it to their advantage. So I do believe it was a good idea to charge up there and blow it up, which we ended up doing. But in between that objective was an intense firefight. Chris Nichols, who was a Marine I served with in Fox Company, he was, during this firefight, he was right to my left, maybe a meter or so. He ended up getting shot in the face and shot in the neck, or he got shot once, and I just remember it going through his neck. And during all this chaos, Staff Sergeant Guest was right there, yelling commands. He was running up and down, and then he ended up charging the enemy. I mean, he was just there at the front. And when you see that, from one of your leaders, it encourages you. It gives you the courage to follow. So the very next day, we ended up doing an operation that was planned. I believe it was Pakistani Alley. And I remember getting in, once we reached our objective, we got into an intense firefight that lasted a few hours. And Staff Sergeant Guest was in a Humvee in the, commander seat, basically the front passenger seat. And I just remember hearing this huge explosion. I was probably 50 to 75 meters away, with attached to another ground element. And, I saw the smoke go everywhere. And then I was able to see Staff Sergeant Guest yelling, like he got blown out of the Humvee, his legs all jacked up, and he's still trying to lead his Marine by yelling commands. And that's just, it doesn't get any better than that. That's he was the cream of the crop, Yeah. Again, I don't want to, just because I put him up on a pedestal, I don't want to forget about the other leaders that were instrumental in our success out there. Staff Sergeant Bugle, the officers, all the officers, Shellhouse, Corell. I'm forgetting a lot of people, but I have much respect for everyone that fought out there.
Yeah, well said. Well said. What was it like for you, Keith, coming home from that particular deployment?
Okay, so first of all, my best friend, Larry James Martin, and anybody from 2-7 that watches this knows Larry James Martin. He was out there with me. He was a mortarman, and he was on the gun line during that deployment. So he was dropping mortars for me. I remember sitting. It was my last week in Nowzad, and we were sitting together having coffee or something, and I just coffee and a cigarette. And I remember saying, I looked over at him, and I said, "I'm so glad we got out of this alive, and with no mental health issues." And I guess nothing could be farther from the truth looking back. I remember having a conversation though, and I was like, we got out of here alive, and we're mentally and physically okay, but that wasn't the case. Coming home was actually fine for me until I got out of the Marine Corps. I didn't start to have issues until I got out of the Marine Corps. I had the security and the safety of the Marine Corps. My friends were still there. When I got back, I almost had a year left before I EAS. So I didn't really have too many issues while I was still in.
At what point did you realize I'm not doing so well, and I maybe I don't have the capacity to manage whatever's going on in my own mind, and I need to reach out for help?
It became noticeable to me and others, i.e. my family and friends, pretty much as soon as I left the Marine Corps. My drinking picked up. The stress that I felt was immense. The pressure to support my family. I had several stressors: trying to find a job, trying to worry about. I had a newborn daughter at the time, and really no clear direction on where to go after the military. The military was my identity, and still to this day, I struggle. Sometimes I'm in and out of that identity. I have a constant identity crisis because sometimes I feel like I'm still that person. And of course, I'm a Marine until I die. Semper Fi until I die. But identity crisis, stress, lack of purpose, no clear direction. These are all things that I faced. And the one that sticks out to me that I still struggle with is camaraderie. And that's why I try very hard to stay connected and keep 2-7 connected.
Mm-hmm. You do. I've mentioned to you before, but I really notice and appreciate how much you're active, even just on the group page, and trying to continually kind of buoy everybody, encourage them. You're very, very engaging and interactive. And yet what you're saying, and I think that's very normal and it's honest, is, you still struggle too. There's probably every day, I'm sure, that you think about your experience in Afghanistan. There's probably not a day goes by that you don't think about some of these guys, and engage with some of the ones that are still alive that you reach out to help. Let me ask you, you did a New York Times interview for that one particular article or set of articles that got a lot of traction for 2-7, and they specifically talked about 2-7 as being the forgotten battalion. What was your take on that sort of nickname then, and what's your take, if different at all, now? The only way I believe we're the forgotten battalion, the reason we got that moniker was because all the units that came after us, we say we were the first unit in Afghanistan in 2008 to be there since, I believe, 2001. Okay.
The first Marine infantry unit to go there and actually, kick Taliban ass.
Mm-hmm.
And so all the other units after us got a lot of media attention, got a lot of, high profile attention, whereas our unit 2-7, there wasn't much talk about what we did in 2008. Not much was known. So that's why, you hear the moniker, the Forgotten Battalion. Now, from a first person view, which I have, we did not have a ton of support. And I'm sure there are some technical terms for this that officers use, like all the resources that a combat infantry unit are supposed to have. We did not have that. We did not have, Marine air support all the time. We didn't have tanks. We didn't have all these things that we had in Iraq, for sure. So we were out there doing, expeditionary work. There are days that we would go black on ammo. I remember having to be very resourceful with my mortars. We had to calculate operations based on our ammo supply, which sucked, because we wanted to go out there and just get after it, but we had to keep in mind our resources. Other than that, I don't believe we're forgotten, at least not anymore. After the articles came out, we did get a lot of attention as far as people wanting to reach out and help, nonprofits. The articles were a huge help in getting Semper Fi Fund to help us out. Now we're able to do unit reunions on a regular basis, which is, I believe, is super helpful. And it's one of my purposes in life is, to keep the Marines together.
Mm-hmm.
And I plan on coordinating reunions until the day that I die, because I want to see the Marines just as much, and the docs, just as much as, they want to see each other. So.
Yeah, you talk about that camaraderie and how important it is to foster and to build. And it sounds like this is a key part of it for you and for the battalion. For 27 veterans who may not have been to one of these, what's it like? What's one of these reunions like for you?
So a smile ear to ear the entire time. There are, when you first arrive, you see these faces that you haven't seen in years. And it's just nostalgic and incredible. It's a great feeling. And, you get 2 to 3 days with these guys to reconnect, recollect on combat memories, and it's almost just like having that family bond again that you had when you were with your platoon or company or in battalion. It's just a great feeling. And what we do at these reunions is, we'll do activities, fun activities. We'll do healing activities, such as acupuncture. We're trying to make this benefit the Marines, but we don't want anybody to fall through the cracks in life. So if anybody's struggling, we want to have resources there. We want to have people on deck that are to catch them so they're not falling. That's my goal. That's my vision, is to go through life as a unit,
right,
and just pick up people as they need help.
Yeah.
Because it's inevitable that you're going to have people go to combat and come back and experience life issues, whether it's immediately after or 20 years later. Healing has to take place.
Yeah.
At some point, you're going to have to face it. And I believe these reunions are a catalyst for that. There are guys that were, isolated for years who are coming out of the woodworks to come to these now. And there's just nothing but great things that can come from a reunion.
Looking back for a minute and looking at who you are now in reflection, is there a way that combat has made you successful, made you better, made you the person that you are today?
Yeah, to be completely honest, I think I look around me at society and I realize that I'm a very strong person, stronger than most around me, because of those experiences, and only because of those experiences. I understand that sometimes life is going to suck, but if you stick with it and push through it, there are rewards on the other end. And I don't think, while I try not to compare myself to others, I don't think a lot of people grasp that concept of the way that a Marine infantry grunt, does, or a corpsman, or somebody that's been in sustained combat, or it doesn't even have to be combat. It can be, a life, a near-death experience, for somebody. But you specifically asked about combat, so yeah, I'm just willing to take whatever resource I have, no matter how low I get. I face it. I say I can do this, and overcome my obstacles, adapt and overcome. Marine Corps motto.
So when you think about things that have specifically helped you, Keith, resources that you've tapped into, whether those be organizations or programs, is there something specific that sticks out in your mind, something that's been helpful for you and you're continuing to grow and succeed?
Sure. So after getting out of the military, I struggled with alcoholism for a number of years, up until 2017. In 2017, I had an incident, and I decided that it was time to go to rehab. And went to this place. I was accepted into this rehab center in San Diego called Aspire, and it's a VA program.
Okay.
And I was there for 4 months, and I was able to get clean from alcohol. And to this day, I do not drink. While I was there, it was like an all-in-one for veteran. You know, if you have financial issues, all right, let's get you some financial counseling, get you on the right track. If you're having credit issues, let's write letters to creditors asking for, you know, for forbearance. Or they had diet. If you're having health issues with your body, you know, they had dietitian there. So it was all inclusive help, and it really helped me. So I would definitely recommend that for, you know, veterans that are facing serious struggle.
Okay. And I can certainly link to that in the show notes. It's called Aspire, and it's run by the VA. Is that correct?
Yes. And it's a center that houses 40 veterans at a time. And they will definitely do what they can to help you out. Yeah. I recommend it. Other than that, you know, I used my GI Bill to get my bachelor's degree, and I used Voc Rehab to get my master's degree in business.
Okay.
So while I've had my struggles of ups and downs, I have continued to achieve, you know, personal endeavors. You know, so
for somebody who's listening who's struggling daily, who, you know, might feel like, hey, I'm not fixed yet. When is this ever going to get better? What would you tell them?
I would say that you probably need to find your crowd and, you know, run with your tribe. Find your tribe. If you're in a bad situation, get in a different environment that, you know, will help you. So there are several programs like MVP, Merging Vets and Players. It's a fairly new nonprofit out there with some 2-7 Marine involvement, and they focus on physical fitness.
Okay.
And physical fitness has been huge for me. After I swore away alcohol, I decided I wanted to get into great, you know, physical form and really focus on that. And it's been huge in my helping me mentally. To stay in shape and strive for a better body every day, more health. Health is wealth. You know, at least it does it for me. I think a big factor in that too is the chemicals that my brain experienced during combat. Just that surge of adrenaline every single day. Really changed my brain. And now I do have an addictive personality, and I have to have an outlet for that. I seek that excitement. And so for me, the gym, you know, lifting heavy weights, running fast, getting that out of me, that energy out of me, is crucial to my health.
It's hard to believe a Marine addicted to heavy weights and running, but I'll take your word for it.
All right.
Oh, that's great.
But, you know, that's just one outlet. That you know, there are other. Again, you know, find something where there are like-minded people, and let yourself be vulnerable, like you were when you joined the Marine Corps. You were being very vulnerable. You were vulnerable with your life. You know, you swore to defend this nation. So be vulnerable once again, and seek out people that are there to help you. Now, I'm only saying this because I experience it, and I still experience it. I struggle with isolating myself, you know, and so I speak from experience.
So part of what I'm taking from what you're saying, it's great, by the way, thank you for sharing from your heart. Part of what I'm hearing you say is that struggle, the battle, if you will, is a normal part of life. Like there's there's never a day when we arrive. But if you're finding yourself constantly sort of slipping back, rather than feel despondent, just do something to keep that momentum going forward.
Yes.
And
I think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and in keeping that momentum going forward, what do you do on the bad days? What do you do when you find yourself tripping or slipping back?
I've learned now to not dig my hole deeper. Once my hole is dug, stop, collect my thoughts. All right, how can I get out of this hole without digging it deeper? You know, a lot of Marines and corpsmen, we're the type of people that don't. And I'm generalizing here, so bear with me. This does not apply to everybody.
Sure.
But a lot of us don't come from great supportive homes or background. You know, the Marine Corps does typically attract a certain type of person, and they're typically great people with great hearts, but they do have challenging backgrounds. I'm one of those. So it can be in our nature to be destructive, self-destructive. And that's something that I'm trying to grow out of, is self-destructiveness when I face an obstacle. So don't dig your hole deeper than it is. Connect with somebody that can pull you out of that hole. Don't stay, you know, if you can't dig yourself out, then connect with people. And that's typically what I try to do, and what other Marines try to do on the group forum that we have for 2-7 on Facebook. You know, if somebody's reporting that they're having some issues, all right, we try to find the quickest, easiest, most efficient way to get that Marine or sailor help.
Yeah. Let me maybe just ask one last question. I'll give you a chance to think about it, but what I'm going to ask is, what advice you might give to a new Marine, somebody who's either, you know, fresh out of SOI, or maybe they haven't even enlisted yet?
No, I would say, so I'm thinking back on my service, and I would describe myself, the way that I served. I was a field Marine, so I was really good at my job. I was intelligent. I executed my job, you know, I think, you know, very honorably, and everyone else seems to think so. But I was not the best garrison Marine. Now, I never got in any kind of significant trouble or anything like that. I believe I got one page 11. But I could have done more with my career, you know, even though I knew I was probably only going to serve 4 years. I did have some interest in going officer, but that burned out after the 2008 deployment.
Okay.
So if I had to go back, you know, I went through boot camp, and I graduated squad leader. So I was promoted from private to PFC.
Okay.
Then I went to SOI, and I was a squad leader there for mortars, and I graduated Lance Corporal. So I got into the fleet as a Lance Corporal. And I remember when I dropped in, they called me Super Boot, because it was very rare for, you know, for a new Marine to be a Lance Corporal in the fleet. And I got a lot of stuff for it. But my seniors had just gotten back from Iraq a few months prior, and so they had, you know, the kind of like a shitbag attitude, a lot of them. And them being my leaders, you know, I was what, 19 or 20, and I just followed suit under their leadership. And even though they're very competent at their jobs and very good combat leaders, they didn't set the best example in garrison. So I followed suit. I didn't do my MCIs. Cutting scores were, you know, like 1850. They were very high. So without doing my MCIs and without improving my fitness tests, there were, you know, I wasn't going to pick up corporal. So to you new Marines, I would say give it while you're a Marine, give it all that you have every day. Be the best Marine and live by the code, you know, in everything that you do. And that's something that I regret. I really do. I wish I would have picked up meritorious sergeant, which was, you know, very possible if I would have kept the same motivation that I had coming into the Marine Corps. And it's just one of those things, you know, you look back on anything that you do in life and you're like, I wish I would have put my all in. And that's what I do now. You know, it comes with maturity, but definitely give it all that you got. You'll be proud of yourself when you finish your time in the Corps.
Well, it's interesting because I think I see a lot of people who kind of just coast through and they do okay, but sometimes it's folks who bottom out who end up doing really well because they use that as a motivation to kind of, as a launching pad, a springboard to say, I don't ever want to end up mediocre or worse again. And it really fuels them to be successful in, you know, follow-on seasons in life. And that's what I see happening to you. That's great. I like that. It's a good lesson learned.
Yeah. I mean, you probably only get one chance to serve. So you do it with all your heart and be the best, because it's only going to help you in your other endeavors in civilian life. Yeah, that's my recommendation.
Well, Keith, I know you fought hard.
Also, don't pet the burning dog, as First Sergeant Flegel would say. Don't pet the burning dog.
Don't touch a burning dog. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, Keith, you fought hard. You cared deeply about the people you served with, and all of your decisions that you made were through that filter. You might have gone back and done some things significantly differently than you did, and that's part of the growing up process too. But thank you again for serving our country. Thank you for fighting alongside of those other lines in combat, our United States Marines and our Navy corpsmen and our chaplains. And thanks for doing what you did for our country. And I look forward to seeing what genuinely great things are going to come out of your next season of life, now with this master's degree and some great motivation and training.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for myself. I do have a new outlook on life after going through, several ups and downs. But I was able to maintain my composure, and I'm ready to kick ass in 2019.
Sounds great. Sounds great, brother. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Look forward to being in touch with you in the near future.
All right. It was my pleasure. Thank you.